Hi everyone, today's Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, 2:51 p.m., around 62 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 17 Celsius. I'm at the 49th Street station on the NRW trains, and I'm getting out at the 47th Street exit. In this video, I'll take you on a walk down Broadway from 47th Street all the way down to South Ferry. I've done multiple walks of Broadway already, but none of them have been narrated. One of my most viewed videos actually is walking down Broadway from Times Square to South Ferry, so this time I get to add a little bit of my knowledge and insight into this walk. Here's one of the high entrance exit turnstiles that I don't really like. So there's two sides here. One exit is the Broadway side and the other one is the 7th Avenue side. Doesn't really matter which side you pick because they're so close to each other here anyway. So I just exited onto street level and immediately this is Olive Garden, chain Italian restaurant. I wouldn't suggest you to go to Olive Garden. There's much better restaurants around here to eat, but we're right in the thick of Times Square. Here you have Starbucks coffee. This is the Westfield Hotel. Dos Caminos. So this is where it is, folks. When you think of Broadway, you think of the theater district in Times Square, and we're right in the middle. Here's the TKTS booth. You can get a lot of discount Broadway and off-Broadway tickets here. And all around us, you can see all the electronic billboards for which Times Square is famous for. Times Square is a subsection of Midtown. This is a gigantic pedestrian plaza. Wasn't always like this. Back in the 90s, this was open to car traffic to travel southbound. If you're coming here for the first time, I know how overwhelming it could be. There's probably not too many places around the world like Times Square. Here's Father Duffy, a statue of Father Duffy. This area is called Father Duffy Square. Times Square is my favorite place in New York City. Originally, it was called Longacre Square, after the town in the same place in England. The name changed to Times Square when the newspaper company, the New York Times, moved here in 1901. I was going to say 1898, but that's when the 5 boroughs of New York City were consolidated. But around the same time frame anyway. Make sure you look both ways before you cross. Jaywalking is a social norm in New York City and it's widely accepted. The police don't really enforce it. Looks like the city's still doing some construction with the bollards here. They protect against vehicular attacks on the sidewalk. There was a major incident maybe a year ago or a few years ago, I don't really remember, where a car jumped the curb and mowed down a lot of people. It's an unfortunate incident, but these metal bollards are here to protect such a thing from happening again. You see that person is trying to hand me a flyer I saw it was for Frozen. One thing I have to warn you about in Times Square is you have to be careful of people handing you things, because they may pressure you into giving them a donation. And some of their events may be very high priced. You can probably get them cheaper somewhere else, such as the TKTS booth that I told you about, or the Today Tix app, a great place to get Broadway tickets. And another thing about Broadway too, regarding the theaters, a Broadway theater is called a Broadway theater because of its seating size. I think if it seats more than 1,000 people is considered a Broadway theater. I forget the exact number, but that's why it's called a Broadway theater. This is pretty interesting. Haven't really seen this around. The city installed these wax figures. Oh, this is Broadway show globes hosted by Madame Tussauds. I know what this is, Wicked Witch and Dorothy. Another thing too I have to warn you about is with these pedestrian zones over here. The street hustlers and costume characters are only legally allowed to be in that area. If they're outside of that area trying to haggle you or approach you for services, then they're not allowed to. But please be aware, if you pose with them to take a picture, they do expect a donation and a tip, and some of them can be quite aggressive with it. The same thing with people handing out free CDs. They'll expect a donation for their CD. And if you refuse, sometimes they may be very aggressive about it. But they're not scam artists, they're just, I would call them aggressive salesmen. Their CDs are full of music, and you can listen to some of them if you so desire. But for me, that's not my kind of thing. I think this person is selling services to a tour bus. No, it's for a restaurant. Here's the headquarters of NASDAQ, the electronically traded stock exchange. It's not as busy as it can be in Times Square, but there is a sizable crowd here. Oh, by the way, this building to my right, the Walgreens building, this is 1 Times Square. This is where the ball drops during New Year's and New Year's Eve. If you'd like to see what it's like on New Year's Eve trying to get here, you should check out my video of me going to the New Year's Eve ball without any intention of going there, and the security line. It's pretty crazy. This building, the H&M building, is called the Condé Nast building. It's one of the largest, the tallest skyscrapers in the Times Square area. Here's 42nd Street, one of the busiest crosstown streets in Midtown. Many bus services travel along here, as well as the Grand Central Shuttle. And also the number 7 line. This is the Times Square 42nd Street subway station. It serves 9 subway lines and also connects to 3 more at the Port Authority bus terminal, which is located on 8th Avenue and is a major commuter hub. Many people use the Port Authority bus terminal to get to work and travel to further destinations from the city. So I've exited the Times Square area, heading south on Broadway towards Herald Square. Broadway is a very unique street in that it's a diagonal route through Midtown Manhattan until it gets to 14th Street, and then it curves slightly to about 10th Street and then straightens out. This was due to the street being modeled on an Indian trail. Broadway was an Indian trail for most of its history. It led through the rocky Manhattan, through all the marshland and swamps and wooded areas. And it's kept the path more or less with some modifications. You can see here, this is called the Garment District, named because there was a long history of clothing and garment businesses here. Although that's located more on 7th Avenue though. Here you can see one of the many various newsstands in New York City. It's very convenient here to get drinks and newspapers, chewing gum. Wonder what's going on here. LC Rooftop. Never heard of this place, but there are many rooftop bars you can visit that go up to the top of the skyscrapers, and you can get an excellent view of the city. Oftentimes you don't have to pay that expensive ticket to go to the top of the Rock or to the Empire State Building. You can go to a rooftop bar, pay for a drink or two, and then enjoy the view. I did take a look for that cyclist. They weren't supposed to be on this side because this is the pedestrian plaza. Now these trucks, the Weed World candies, they don't actually contain any CBD in them. There's been many news reports saying that they don't contain the ingredient that they claim to sell. So just be informed of it. Here's Luke's Lobster, a very famous restaurant throughout the area. Very, very good lobster rolls here. It gets a little bit chaotic sometimes when people decide to step to the side or walk in diagonals or angles. Generally, people stay to the right here. Like that. Generally, I like to see where people are walking before cutting in front of them like that. But it sometimes gets busy, and that's not always possible. Now these I Love New York stores, you have to be careful because a lot of their pricing, sometimes they'll be higher than normal. Sometimes you can get them a lot cheaper in places like the street vendors, such as in Chinatown or around the SoHo area. But I do find that New York souvenirs, even though they are a lot higher than normal over there, they're not as expensive as souvenirs throughout the world. But you just have to do your own research. If the product seems like a good value for you, then you can go and buy it. Oh! I tell you, I have no words when I come to see, when I see bad traffic like that, or traffic decisions, I should say. You do have to look both ways before you cross. If you're driving or operating a vehicle, you have to be mindful and exercise due care. I hate to see an accident or a car crash. I know many of you talk about me talking about bad traffic incidents all the time, but it's very, very important. One bad move and that could be it for you. And that's not something I wish to happen to anybody. So take it seriously. Here's Shake Shack. We're actually going to pass by the original location of Shake Shack further on in this video at Madison Square.
That's my type of question.
You don't like them?
Like that lady there, she was about to step into traffic with her cell phone. I mean, sometimes you have your eyes on the road, but your head's not there.
She's ready for it. She's been...
Very, very sad to see people in need and ask for change. I do believe it's important as a society to support them, but do be aware that there are many scam artists out there who pretend to be homeless, and big shame on them. And that's why I prefer to donate to organizations which I know will help the homeless out. It's really sad to see. But I'll often support the homeless by giving them food and offering them assistance if necessary. Here we have Macy's, the self-proclaimed world's largest department store. Big traffic jam here, that's for sure. This store gets very, very decorated during the holidays. Right after Thanksgiving, the store windows are decorated with holiday themes. It changes every year. I mean, look at this. This is so sad to see. There's someone here in the middle of the sidewalk taking up the whole entire space and writing there. Wealth inequality is a big issue in New York City. That's something I hope would be corrected over the years, but just have to hope for the better. Over here to my left, looking up, is the Empire State Building. It was the world's tallest building for 42 years. It was completed at a very, very difficult time for the United States economy during the Great Depression. This is 34th Street. One of the main streets connecting the west side of Manhattan to the east side. This is a big route for the Queens Midtown Tunnel to connect to the Lincoln Tunnel. The Lincoln Tunnel being on the Hudson River side connecting to New Jersey, and the Queens Midtown Tunnel on the east side connecting Midtown Manhattan to Long Island City in Queens. This is a big, big shopping area. I'd say after SoHo, this is the largest shopping area in New York City. There's many retail stores along 34th Street. The city recently expanded the bike lane here. Before it was a big mess with a fence and people will walk all over it. Over here on the corner of 6th Avenue and 33rd Street is the Manhattan Mall. Here's Greeley Square. By the way, the name Herald Square and Greeley Square came about because they were two competing newspaper companies. Herald Square being in reference to the New York Herald. And I think Greeley Square, I forgot what the newspaper was, but I think it has a reference to the New York Post today. That's the surviving company. Could be wrong. Here's one of the entrances to the 34th Street Herald Square subway station, the second busiest in the system after Times Square 42nd Street. There's 8 subway lines that serve, as well as the PATH train, which stands for the Port Authority Trans-Hudson. You can take a train to go to New Jersey from here, but the systems aren't connected to each other. There's a separate fare if you're going to take the PATH train when you compare it to the subway. So this street down here is Koreatown. It extends for about a block and a half, all the way down to, I believe, like halfway to Madison Avenue, I should say. But even though it's only 1 block and a half, it's very, very dense. There's a lot of good restaurants in there, and I recommend anyone to visit New York to try a restaurant in Koreatown. One thing I love about New York is the density of restaurants here. You can get a lot of different cuisines from all over the world. As you can see, New York City is always under construction. That's an undeniable fact. This term is made up by me, but I call this part of Broadway construction wave. Look at this, there's a building going up here. If you're watching this video in like 5 years' time, this will probably be completed. And also there's another building going up over here on 30th Street. And I know you probably can't see it right now because it's so far, but even the Flatiron building, the world famous Flatiron building, is under construction as well. So it's an interesting time to do this video. You can see it while New York City is under construction. Very, very impressive building here. It's an interesting architectural design too. It's like stacked at angles, and it doesn't really lay flush with the next level below it. Okay, now that I've entered the 20s, I've officially entered the Flatiron District, named after the Flatiron Building. Originally it was called the Fuller Building. It's one of the earliest skyscrapers in New York City. And when it was under construction and when it was completed, a lot of people hated it. They hated the design of the Flatiron Building because it was a unique shape and it kind of like blocked out the wind, and among other different complaints. But now it's beloved by most people in New York City. Here's another building under construction at 28th Street. Now, one thing that I don't recommend for people to do is to block the sidewalk like that and walk like 3 people side to side from one another. That's just rude. This is the 28th Street subway station. The subway station is unique in that this side is for uptown only and the other side is for downtown only. Many of the subway station entrances are like that, so be mindful of where you're getting on and off the train. You don't want to be swiping in at the wrong side and then you have to turn around further up or further down. Of course, that happens on a frequent basis anyway during the service changes, and especially on weekends, so you do have to be careful of those as well. The New York City subway system runs 24 hours, 7 days a week. In some capacity, at least. Sometimes they'll have to shut down like 3/4 of the line just to do some repair work, and then they'll have shuttle buses. But for the most part, it runs efficiently. It's been getting better. The fare is $2.75 a ride. And it also has unlimited fare options as well. You can buy them in 7-day and 30-day denominations. You can see this building's under construction too. I don't think I passed a single block here where it wasn't under construction. This looks like a good cocktail place, the Smith. They've got a lot of different vials of alcohol on the shelf there. Here is 26th Street. Here's where you have to be careful because the walk signal's on and this vehicle's still proceeding through the intersection. I see many businesses packed up their recycling and garbage out for the day. But I've noticed that mistake a lot today just walking through the city. The city's not picking up the trash today because it's election day. If you live in New York, you always have to check the sanitation schedule to make sure they'll be collecting that day. Okay, I'm pretty sure you can see the Flatiron building right now. It's named the Flatiron building because it looks like an iron that's used to iron clothes. Hence the name Flatiron building. This to the left is the Woolworth Monument. It's dedicated in 1857. I think this is the second oldest monument in New York City. This area has been featured in a lot of movies and it's very iconic. There was a film I saw on YouTube, a very, very old film from the early 1900s that showed somebody's hat flying off here. It was all black and white. It was really, really interesting and cool to see. This clock, the yellow clock in front, I know it's been here for a long time. Don't really know too much about its history, but I do know it's significant. In front of me is Madison Square Park. And Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, self-proclaimed world's most famous arena, home of the New York Knicks, originally had its garden here. That's why it's called Madison Square Garden, even though it's not inside Madison Square. Now it's located at 33rd Street and 7th Avenue. Madison Square Park is also the home of Shake Shack in the middle there. You know what, I might as well just go into the park for a little bit and show you. Shake Shack originally started as a hot dog stand, but their business became so popular that they expanded into selling other food items. That's why it's called Shake Shack. because literally it was a shack in the middle of the Madison Square Park. This building with the clock in front, on top I should say, is the Metropolitan Life clock tower. Here's the Flatiron building with all its scaffolding visible. I do know that many of its levels will be converted into hotel space, so maybe in a few years from now you'll be able to book a hotel in the Flatiron building. But it does look a lot different now with the scaffolding. If you like to see what the Flatiron building looks like without the scaffolding, I'm sure there's plenty of pictures up. You can also check out my other videos of Broadway or even Fifth Avenue, where I walk down to where this building is and you can see it in all its glory. Yep, again with the garbage. Even though election day falls on an odd numbered calendar year today, there are still some candidates who are up for election. Also, the New York City Charter was had a bunch of questions on it today to revise it. Here's a building that's available, retail space. Around the Flatiron building area too is a lot of different shopping areas. This area I think will be called NoHo, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's not NoHo. Actually, I don't really know what this area is called because it's kind of in between Gramercy Park and Kips Bay. I guess it would just still be called Flatiron or Madison Square, I guess. Here's a store from Copenhagen, Flying Tiger. They have a lot of discounted products here that are very, very practical. I think the owner of this bicycle should take more care locking it up to make sure it doesn't fall over like that. This gigantic ⁴ stands for WeWork, the real estate company which leases out office space on a short-term basis. I know they've been running into financial challenges recently. Seems like it's not a profitable business to run, but we'll see what happens with that. This is an interesting building, the Brooks Brothers Red Freeze Cafe. Different columns, European style, as well as this building here. Sometimes in order to really appreciate New York too, you have to look up. Not only look in front of you, but look up. Now I know I'm walking on top of these subway grates, but I wouldn't really recommend it because although it's very, very highly unlikely, there is that slight chance that you can fall through. And they're not always the most stable to walk on when it gets wet, but I'm only doing it because of speed. I know you can't smell it here, but when that subway passes underneath, you can definitely smell the ground underneath. There's a famous movie scene in which Marilyn Monroe stands on top of a subway grate, and then when the subway comes through, lifts up her dress. That's been recreated many times. So here's 18th Street. This is the Paragon Sporting Goods Company. Very good place to get all your different sporting goods, all different sports from tennis, volleyball, cycling, running, swimming. So I've officially entered Union Square. This area is named Union Square not because of the Union Army or because of the country, but because it's the union of two main roads, historical roads through the area, that being the Bowery Road and Broadway. The Bowery Road is now called 4th Avenue, but it will continue to be called Bowery once you get past Cooper Square, I believe. This is another big shopping area. Many businesses here include Petco, Barnes & Noble, Staples, Whole Foods, McDonald's. There's a big Nordstrom rack over there, Burlington. This is a very, very challenging crosswalk to cross because of the two-way bicycle lane as well as the traffic lane over there. So look both ways before you cross.
Exactly 4 o'clock.
On Saturdays, there's a farmer's market that comes by here too that sets up. It's very popular with many people here. By the way, here's the Barnes & Noble's bookstore I was telling you about. I would say this is the most famous Barnes & Noble location in New York City. Now this grand structure I don't really know too much of the history about, but it definitely looks very impressive. In this part of Union Square Park, the North Part, sometimes they'll host a lot of cultural events too. Most recently, I went to the Thai food event here, the Thai cultural event. I did a walkthrough around that area. This is the public restroom. I also have many videos on the Union Square area, including one where I walked through the park and around the perimeter multiple times. You can check those out as well. Here's Union Square Park. Now, Broadway doesn't really have a official street in Union Square proper, mainly because if it were to continue its route, it would have to go right in between this park. But this area saw a lot of development when the subway came to the area. This whole section had to be dug up and built. They used what was called the cut and cover method to construct the subway, where they would just bury the ground. Well, not bury, dig up the ground, lay the tracks, and then cover it up with some columns along with some dirt, and that was it. It was a very quick way to construct the subway.
That's great. I love it when you do that.
But Broadway is directly in front of me. This side is 4th Avenue, or historically the Bowery. Bowery is Dutch for farm, because back when New York was New Amsterdam and many years after, this area was very, very underdeveloped. It had a lot of farmland, and it's not what it looks like today. Now, this area of Union Square is very famous for all the chess players. You can go and play games with them for a fee. Don't expect to win though, because they're very, very good at what they do. It's also the site of many political movements, and also this grand statue of George Washington on his horse. You can read up some information about the George Washington statue here. But he was a very, very important figure in American history. Also the first president of the United States. So here is 14th Street. Most recently, it got turned into a busway. Through traffic cannot use this street. They must make a right on the next available right from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. It sped up the bus services dramatically throughout the area. One of the main reasons the city implemented the busway was because there was the threat of the L train, which runs along 14th Street and going to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. There was a threat of that subway line being shut down. So the city had to draft up alternative transportation options, and one of those was the 14th Street Busway. So the shutdown didn't happen. Now there's a mild inconvenience where one of the tubes is closed during nights and weekends, and you have to wait 20 minutes in between trains. But the busway is still here. So now this is the area where Broadway makes its last turn, all the way from 14th Street to 10th Street. And my battery died. I'll change it once I get across the street. Okay, I just crossed the street at 13th Street and continuing on this walk of Broadway down to South Ferry. Here's an antique store. It's closed to the general public. Oh wow, we have a real estate office here. I'll let you glance at some of these listings. Maybe you want to decide to move to Manhattan. Okay. So I did remember hearing on the Bowery Boys podcast about this area, why Broadway has this curve here from 10th Street to 14th Street. And they were talking about this area being a very wealthy area. Many people had farms here, and they wanted the city to divert the path of Broadway going northward. And they also said that Grace Church, which is in front of me, well, not in front of me, past 11th Street, they thought that might have been a factor as well, but I think they concluded that it wasn't. But it is strange that this curve happened. It is what it is, I guess. Here's 7-Eleven. They're open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Here's a vintage clothing store called the Metropolis. Oh, and how can I forget the Strand bookstore? It was, I think, a block past. They have miles and miles of books. You can go there. It's the largest bookstore in New York City. Wow, take a look at this construction site. Is that a deep hole or what? What are they gonna make here? My gosh. Anyway, here's Grace Church. I think it's an Episcopal church. It's definitely very pretty and very unique. It's also one of the oldest structures in Manhattan. I think this is a Gothic style church. Okay, past 10th Street, I'll be entering the neighborhood of NoHo. NoHo standing for north of Houston Street. SoHo stands for, you guessed it, south of Houston Street, which is only a few blocks south from here. We're actually getting very close to the main area, I should say, of New York University. Many people like to joke that New York University, which is the largest university in New York City, doesn't have a campus because there's no like real green space and like wooded areas and grass to walk around. In fact, the real campus is kind of the streets of New York City. And also there's Washington Square Park, which is kind of like its unofficial campus. Even though it is a public park, a lot of NYU students like to use it to study and hang out. But Washington Square Park is 2 blocks down and 3 blocks to the right, if you like to visit it. I don't go to it in this video. I only talk about it. There's a lot of construction going on over here too. Here's the 8th Street subway station, served by the R and W trains. Sometimes the N and Q also when there's service changes, and during late nights. Take a look at some of the architecture around here. A lot of old styles, European inspired. This one in particular on Astor Place looks very nice, very grand. If I were to head west on Astor Place, no, east on Astor Place, I was thinking left was west, but no, this is east. You'll head to the neighborhood of the East Village. And also St. Mark's Place is 2 blocks down. You can get very, very good food there. Very popular nighttime spot to get something to eat and hang out. You can also expect long lines too. So if you go there, be sure to get there early. Now we see a prominently displayed NYU flag. You know this is an NYU building, as well as the one across the street. That one is the bookstore, and this one here is the Tisch School of the Arts. If you plan on coming to NYU, know that the tuition is very, very expensive compared to other options around the area. You are paying for the convenience of being in New York City. I don't know the exact tuition amount. I'm curious. I'm going to look it up. Okay, in 2016 to 2017, the tuition to attend NYU was $49,000 a year. So that could easily be someone's salary, even more. And there's also an article I'm seeing from CNBC that it actually costs students $76,614 to attend NYU. Oh, and they're using a figure of $53,310 a year for tuition and mandatory fees, $18,684 for room and board, $752 for books and supplies, $1,110 for local transportation, and $2,758 for personal expenses. Wow. Yeah. Could be easily 2 or 3 times someone's salary. The cost of higher education is kind of crazy. It's a problem throughout the United States. Much research has been done on why tuition and higher education costs are so expensive. I've heard everything from people wanting to. Okay, thank you. Someone just shielded their face from being recorded, so I'm not going to do any editing. I think I did my due diligence pointing it away for the most part. But I forgot what I was saying now. This is why I don't like losing track like that. Oh yeah, I was talking about the higher education. I've heard everything from it's the government supplying all these loans and inflating the prices to supply and demand that more people want to go to college or university. This street is very interesting. 3rd Street. It's named Great Jones Street from Broadway to Lafayette Street, I believe. Maybe even a little bit further down. I know that Jones, I think he was a comptroller for New York City, and the city wanted to expand Broadway further northward. So instead, Jones didn't want to sell his property to New York City. But there was a deal done between Jones and the city in that he would give his land up only if there was a street named after him. So they named the street Great Jones Street. I think he wanted it to be named Jones Street, just simply Jones Street, but there was already another Jones Street somewhere else, so they had to make it Great Jones Street. That's the history behind that one. And I won't be surprised if there's a history behind this one too, Bond Street.
It's like very simplistic type lines, like very minimal.
So now we're getting very close to Houston Street. I'm only a block away now after Bleecker Street. You can see many of the cast iron buildings here. It's a very unique style of architecture. I talk about it more in my walk of SoHo. You can check out that video. I think I walked around many of the streets of SoHo and talked about its history and all the shops there. But in this walk, I'll just be walking down Broadway. Someone's wearing an F Train subway shirt. And they also voted, so Good for them. I always encourage people to vote. Here's Urban Outfitters across the street. Originally, it was the New York Mercantile Exchange. Also, you can see Best Buy across the street and the unique lettering above the store's name and the logo. And on the corner of Houston Street is Adidas. I learned the correct way to pronounce that from a video. Many people incorrectly pronounce it as Adidas, but that's incorrect. But it comes from two words, Adi and Das. Adidas. SoHo is going under some dramatic changes. So you can see both sides of Broadway, there's scaffolding up. You can get a subway right here at the Broadway Lafayette Street station underneath Houston Street. Here you can see all of the architecture of SoHo, as well as all the shops here. This is one of the busiest shopping areas in New York City after 5th Avenue. You have everything from the North Face, Forever 21, Uggs, Uniqlo, Gap, Banana Republic, Louis Vuitton, Guess, Adidas, like I showed you before. Although that's in NoHo, but it's close enough anyway.
Yeah, sounds like a plan for me.
One thing I do have to warn you about are these raised ledges in SoHo. It's very easy to trip over them because it's not level with the sidewalk. So be careful when walking down here. Here is Prince Street. If you're taking the Broadway line, the N, R, W, and Q trains, the R and W will stop here at all times. And the N and Q will stop here during service changes and late nights. Or maybe the Q train doesn't stop here during late night, but just check the schedule. But just a little bit of brief history about SoHo. It was a very, very big manufacturing area, especially during the World Wars. I believe they had a lot of influence through there. And after that, it fell into disuse and decline. And after many years of neglect, artists found a particularly interesting place to set up. So they moved into SoHo because of the cheap property prices. And then the area started to become more more in demand and more gentrified from there. That's the brief history of SoHo. It was nicknamed the Hell's 100 Acres at one time. It's a big area for textiles. And now it's a big area for retailers, and most of the artists have been priced out of the neighborhood because this area has been considered trendy now. That's a history that's been repeated throughout New York City's history. An area gets depressed, artists find it attractive, they move in, the area gets gentrified and they get priced out. This happens to many areas like Williamsburg, Tribeca, SoHo, the East Village now, and now even the Lower East Side. And one area I do see it happening or starting to happen is Red Hook in Brooklyn. I wonder how many of you have been counting the shopping bags in SoHo, because I see a lot of shoppers out here. Once it gets closer to Thanksgiving and during the holidays, this area is going to be packed with shoppers, especially during Black Friday and during Thanksgiving weekend. So if you're someone who likes bargains, be on the lookout for steep bargains during that weekend. Pro tip, if any of you are in SoHo and looking for a restroom, Bloomingdale's across the street is a great place for it. New York City has an issue with public restrooms. They're not always common to be found. There are some in the public parks, but they're not always maintained as well as they should be. Instead, the cleanest public bathrooms are in hotels. That's if you are able to go inside and use them. Sometimes the front desk won't let you. Department stores are always great. You can always use Starbucks, they're always around, but sometimes those bathrooms are really dirty. Restaurants can be like good and bad. You have to pick one where a restroom is clean and not busy. I like to use restrooms inside the hospitals, doctors' offices, and police stations. A police station has to let you use the bathroom if you ask for it. So that's a quick tip if you're ever in need of a restroom. But you just kind of have to take what you get in terms of restrooms. That's all I could say. Look out for food halls, department stores, areas of public activity like shopping malls. Those will be your best bets in terms of efficient restrooms. And whatever you do, do not use that 25-cent restroom that I used near Madison Square Park. I made a funny video about it. If you take too long doing number 2, I think after 15 minutes, the door automatically opens, which is kind of embarrassing if you need to take that long doing your business, but I found it kind of funny, only because I was voice acting it. Here's Grand Street. Over that way is the neighborhood of Chinatown, the northern boundary of Chinatown proper. Chinatown has a weird boundary. Like west of Broadway is considered Chinatown, but its northern and southern boundaries are a little bit weird. Here's Howard Street. They've got some interesting stuff for sale here inside Broadway Market. They got like, who wants a stuffed giraffe, right? Life-sized. Here's Canal Street. This is the border of three neighborhoods, SoHo, Chinatown, and Tribeca. Tribeca is an acronym, stands for Triangle Below Canal Street, although it's more shaped like a trapezoid if you look like it. So I like to call it the trapezoid below Canal Street. And just because of efficiency, I'm going to walk across the street here. I find this side of Broadway to be less crowded than the other side. But if you like to see a walk of Canal Street or Chinatown, you can check out my videos of those areas as well. I go through them in more detail and more depth. Canal Street is one of the main streets in Chinatown. It's also known for its jewelry trade and also its merchandise good business. I hesitated a little bit there because it used to be the area of a lot of counterfeit goods selling. I don't know if it's still going on today, but I wouldn't be surprised. But no, your $20 leather bag is not going to be on the same quality as a name brand. There's Walker Street and Broadway. Classic car there. This store has some really interesting stuff across the street. The Pearl River Mart has a lot of different Asian style and Chinese style souvenirs you can get. Wow, this store looks like Western style. Indian and cowboy apparel. You find all kinds of things in New York City. And here you have a store dedicated to the motorcycle company, Harley Davidson. Love the background, by the way. That's definitely taken at Brooklyn Bridge Park. Beautiful public park. I recommend anybody to come visit to check out that park, because you have some gorgeous views of the Manhattan skyline, as well as the Brooklyn Bridge and the Statue of Liberty as well. You can't see the Manhattan skyline unless you're off Manhattan, so that's why I recommend you to go there. Here's Franklin Street. As soon as I cross over Canal Street, you notice that Broadway gets a lot less crowded. Not too many people come down here, at least not the tourists, because there aren't really that many stores compared to SoHo, Union Square, Midtown, and that area. I'm actually going to be entering a subsection of another neighborhood soon on this side of the street called the Civic Center, named because there's a lot of governmental buildings here, many courthouses and municipal offices. This, I believe, is a municipal building. This is a very, very interesting street, Catherine Lane. Looks like it's only home to a parking garage and some scaffolding on top. Doesn't make it too inviting. There aren't too many alleyways, contrary to public opinion in New York City. When you see movies or TV shows, you would think New York is full of alleyways, but there are only a handful. The most filmed one was back where Canal Street was, called Portland Alley. This here is a federal building. The IRS has its headquarters here in New York City. Actually, I'm not sure if it's its headquarters, but I do know they have an office inside. So this side is the Civic Center, and that side is Tribeca. Makes a big difference depending on which side of the street you're on for the decor. Wow, this building that's boarded up with the graffiti, I think that used to be Burger King or McDonald's. But yeah, even a big brand name restaurant like Burger King and McDonald's, they're having trouble staying in Manhattan and doing business. I do notice a lot more retail space being for sale and for rent lately. It's not a good sign for the economy. There are signs that a recession is coming. At least that's what I've been hearing on the news, but as I walk the streets of Manhattan, I've been seeing it too. Here's Duane Street. Also in this building at the rear, there's a burial ground called the African Burial Ground. Many of those people were buried there in a potter's field. When New York was being constructed, they moved them up here, they buried them under the ground, and many of them were slaves. They can't identify everybody because it's just so old now and they don't know who's buried there, but during the construction of this building, that's when the African burial sites were located. Many of the areas where the dead were buried, they were buried in areas of very weak soil, which wasn't very constructive to building tall buildings. That's why they use those areas as potter's field. One of the most well-known examples of that is Washington Square Park. Underneath Washington Square Park is an estimated 20,000 dead bodies, and that area is all like marshland and wet ground underneath. That's why they turn that area into a public park. Here's Chambers Street, one of the most important streets of the Civic Center. That's the Manhattan Municipal Building at the end of Chambers Street. That building was designed by the architectural firm of McKim, Mead & White. Here at Warren Street is the entrance to the City Hall subway station, served on the R&W trains. Served by the R&W trains, not on. Yes. No, I'm not too good, sorry.
You living here?
No. Yeah. Where do you need to go?
I go to the Manhattan Downtown Hospital. This is the
Oh.
GOLD.
Gold Street?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's hard to get to from here. Go through this park,
Okay.
and then there's a street there that goes on the bridge. On that side, you follow that street, and
Okay.
you'll be near there.
Thank you.
Okay. I wish I could have helped her in Chinese. I probably could have, but it would have been very, very awkward for me to say. But yeah, I gave her the right directions. It's very hard to find because underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, those streets can be very challenging to cross. But that's where Gold Street is. I think she's referring to New York Presbyterian Hospital. Actually, I definitely know she is because that's the only one there. It's the biggest one. There's City Hall, New York City Hall. Oldest city hall that still serves its original functions. Okay, here is the Woolworth building. Used to be the tallest building in New York City and maybe even the world. but it's very interesting in that it's a Gothic design skyscraper. Very, very beautiful interior. Haven't been inside it myself, but I've seen pictures and it's just stunning. And on the other side of City Hall Park is Park Row. Used to be called Newspapers Row because many of the newspapers here set up shop in order to get the sensational news of the Lower East Side while still being close to City Hall and the financial district where the real New York was. So you see here, I'm going to point up again at the Woolworth building. Very, very impressive. So I'm about to cross over Vesey Street and I'll be entering the next neighborhood of Manhattan, which is the financial district, commonly also referred to by its most popular street, that being Wall Street. This here on the corner of Vesey Street and Broadway is St. Paul's Chapel. It's one of the oldest buildings in New York City. George Washington used to attend this chapel, and many famous people are buried in the cemetery beside it. Over there in the distance is the Freedom Tower. It's 1776 feet tall, the same year that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Also called the One World Trade Center. That is the tallest building in New York City, the One World Trade Center. This area has seen a lot of change throughout the years, especially after September 11, 2001. Big tragedy happened that day when the Twin Towers fell down and this area saw much, much devastation. But New York has recovered from that horrible day. Just take a look at this place, the Fulton Center. This was a very, very expensive building to make. LED lighting, upgraded thermals and transportation hub. If I remember, I think this cost like well over $100 million to make. I'm gonna check the figures for you, because I don't want to give out wrong information. Oh wow, it's over 1.4 billion. You know, I was gonna say it was over 1 billion, but I was like, there's no way it could be over $1 billion. That's like a lot of money, but yeah, a lot of money. But that's a transit center and retail complex. Has many, many different train lines. Connects the Fulton Center to the World Trade Center complex. I did a video one time of transferring from the 2 and 3 train through the Fulton Center, through the World Trade Center complex, and through the Chambers Street Park Place complex just to transfer back to another train on the next stop, completely underground and not having to go on to street level. Another person in need. Very, very, very sad. The city doesn't really do enough to support the people in need. The homeless shelters are in desperate need of funding, and the institutions aren't really there to support everyone. It's a horrible cycle that just keeps going. Here's McDonald's. Took a long walk just to find one. I should mention the time. Right now it is 4:30, so many people in the financial district are getting off work right now. Here is Liberty Street. At Liberty Street and Broadway is the site of Zuccotti Park. This is where Occupy Wall Street happened when there was a major protest against the 1%. Now this building here is called the Equitable Building, the Equitable Life Building. If my stabilizer can work correctly for me. Having troubles with it recently. It's 40 stories tall. And it used to be the largest office building in the world by floor when it was completed in 1915. And this building was unique in that because there weren't such tall buildings built at the time, this building, when it was constructed, it blocked a lot of the sunlight around the surrounding area. So because of this building, the city enacted new laws to prevent this from happening. It's called the setback laws. And those laws define the skyscrapers, that when the skyscrapers got taller, they had to set back from the street in order to let in more sunlight. So it's an interesting way to deal with the issue. So here across the street is Trinity Church and the Trinity Church graveyard. Very impressive building. It's undergoing some renovations right now. You can still go inside it, but it's just not very convenient to go in. Okay, so Trinity Church was built from 1839 to 1846 in the Gothic Revival style. It's an Episcopal church. This is actually the third Trinity Church. Here is the most famous street on the financial district, Wall Street. Down there you can see the New York Stock Exchange as well as Federal Hall. Federal Hall was the site of where George Washington took the oath of office to become the first president of the United States. And the New York Stock Exchange is where all the trading happens. Although not so much today. Now most of the trading happens in other places in around the area. I think most of the trading happens in New Jersey. But you can also check out my financial district walk. I'll reveal more about that
Potentially.
over there if you'd like to check it out. Here was the headquarters of the American Express Company, the financial company.
Well, I guess.
It's a very interesting time to be ending this video soon because the sunlight is going down very quick. This is due to daylight savings time over the weekend when the clocks were turned back 1 hour. All right. I found the President of the United States. I didn't know Donald Trump was on Broadway and Wall Street. I thought he was in the White House. Here's a very, very large gift store. You see the prices here aren't that bad. 99 cents for a postcard. I mean, how much more inexpensive can you get? Here's Gregory's Coffee. Unique coffee place. So I'm actually going to round the corner here at 26 Broadway, which I believe is this corner. It used to be the headquarters of Standard Oil, which was the oil and gas monopoly and energy monopoly for much of its history. It's a very, very impressive building. But I'm going to go to the Wall Street Bowl right now. Oh wow, they're installing a pedestrian plaza here. That's a good idea because this area just gets filled with so many people. But this sculpture was actually a rogue piece of work. One day it showed up right next to the New York Stock Exchange, and it just became a symbol of capitalism. I see that the gash on the bull's forehead was repaired, and also the color dye or whatever they used for staining the Wall Street Bull during the Extinction Rebellion protests has been washed off, so that's good to see. Look, there's a line for the front and the back. The back being for the famous parts. I won't say which ones, but yeah, it's just as famous as the front part. Here's the Standard Oil building. Now it's the place of the New York Film Academy. Now I'm going to walk through Bowling Green. This fence is one of the oldest surviving things of the old New York from New Amsterdam. New York was colonized by the Dutch initially, and their settlement was named New Amsterdam. It ranged all the way from the southern tip of Manhattan all the way up to Wall Street. And it was called Wall Street because they wanted to keep the people contained within the city and to protect against the Europeans from invading. That's why it's called Wall Street, because there was a wall on Wall Street. But this is probably the oldest public park in New York City, Bowling Green. This building in front of me was the old U.S. Customs House. It's a very impressive looking building. Now it's the site of the National Museum of the American Indian, a Smithsonian Institute. You can go in there for free, although you have to be screened by a metal detector and subject to security. But I highly recommend for you to check it out. It's totally amazing. It shows what New York used to look like, as well as the artifacts from back then. There's also the U.S. Bankruptcy Court here. So now this serves two places. Oh wow, that sunset is incredible. I hope I can catch it before it completely goes down, but anyway, this is Bowling Green. I'm going to enter Battery Park now. So here's the U.S. Customs House from the exterior on the side of Broadway. That subway entrance for Bowling Green is very unique. One of my favorite subway entrances in New York City. I think I'll go to the left. It's the same distance if I went to the other side. There's a lot of police activity here. I wonder why. One thing you do have to be careful of right now, I think the city has tried to take measures to prevent this now, but there are these vendors who sell tickets to the Statue of Liberty here, and they'll approach you on the street and inside the park. And many of them, actually all of them, aren't licensed to sell you tickets to the Statue of Liberty. The only one that's allowed to sell you tickets is inside Castle Clinton, right in front of me. That vendor is Statue Cruises. But the ones inside the park and on the sidewalks, they'll sell you tickets to buses and boats that go around the Statue of Liberty and won't go land at the island itself where the statue is located. So just be mindful of that. I know I'm getting a little bit off track of Broadway, but I do have to catch the sunset. It's gorgeous. Plus, there isn't really that much to see. Broadway is pretty much finished. Sounds like there's a party going on there or something. Or someone's singing or rapping maybe.
Get ready for you guys to give you guys the best show possible. Here we go, guys. You guys now have 50
Oh my goodness, they're playing copyrighted music. Now I have to talk over it. But you got to be careful of those Showtime performers because It's about 75% hype and 25% action. They'll be making you wait for like 30 minutes trying to collect donations from everybody, and then they'll perform their jump to get to like jump over people and stuff. It's not really a fair thing to do to people, but you do have to like be mindful of their practices, their business practices. So here's the official Statue Cruises launching area and drop-off point. One of them is called Miss Ellis Island, the boat, and the other one's called Miss New York. So I hope the sunset's still around. If not, then we can still see a good view of the Statue of Liberty in the distance. Let's see, is the sun still around? I think so. Oh, I just missed it. Just barely. All right. Well, hey, what's up? So this is the boat that drops people off in New York City. No, thank you. I did go onto both Liberty and Ellis Islands, as well as climb up to the Statue of Liberty crown. You can check out that video if you're interested. But many people, they spend a lot of time at the Statue of Liberty and don't allocate enough time to Ellis Island. There's a lot to see in Ellis Island, and I advise you to allocate enough time to go see it. I thought I was going to be able to see it within like 4 hours, but that wasn't even enough time for me to see everything. There you see a Staten Island ferry boat making its way to Whitehall Terminal, where I'll be ending the video. Now this area here is a war monument. A lot of names here dedicated to people who have passed. U.S. Army, Air Forces, Naval, Coast Guard. And this is a World War II monument from 1941 to 1945, Bald Eagle. So this area used to be completely underwater. Battery Park and Battery Park City was extended with landfill. The New York Aquarium used to have their location here, but now it's located in Coney Island. And one reference to that aquarium, which used to be here, is this carousel in the distance. This is called the SeaGlass Carousel, and I'm gonna go in there and avoid this gigantic rat, which you probably saw on camera. Yeah, those are the size of New York City rats, folks. Very, very colorful here. The rides are $5 each, by the way. But this is probably unlike any other carousel you've ridden. This is in reference to the New York Aquarium, and they have stationary options as well as moving options. And the moving ones even turn as well. So now back onto Broadway. Not a very big detour, but at least you got to see part of the sunset and the Statue of Liberty, as well as the area where you buy the tickets from. You won't see any ticket sellers here anymore because it's so late in the day that the boats won't operate to go there anymore. So this little church in the middle here is very unique. It's surrounded by tall buildings. This is the site of the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Church. It's unique because I believe she was the first American saint who was canonized. But it's definitely very strange to have a church like this in between skyscrapers. All right. I have approached the Staten Island Ferry. This is a popular spot for tourists to ride because it's a free attraction. It takes you to the New York City borough of Staten Island. The ride lasts about half an hour, and going there you can see great views of the Statue of Liberty. That's the reason why most tourists take this ferry, and then they hop off the boat and they ride it back. But that's not the only reason to take this ferry either. There's a lot of things on Staten Island as well, including the Empire Outlets, which is right next to the Staten Island Ferry. You can get a lot of shopping done.
Yeah, I knew you somewhere.
But anyway, this is the end of this video, everybody. I know it's a long walk down Broadway, but I hope you found it informative and I hope you liked it. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to my channel. Like this video if you did, and comment down below on what you found useful in this video and what you learned about it, and what you learned about or what you have to offer. I'll catch you later. Take care, everyone.